When the residents of a remote village close to the Arctic notice a strange iceberg floating in the water, they are curious and intrigued. But when they notice something unexpected sitting on its surface, they turn pale from shock. Every spring in the small fishing village of Fairyland, massive icebergs drift down from the Arctic. The sight of these floating giants has always been a source of wonder and pride for the residents. It's hard to look away when these huge blocks of ice start floating next to the village. So, when one of the biggest icebergs of the season began its descent from the Arctic and moved along the shore, residents and tourists alike stopped their daily activities to admire it. The ice was stark white, and for a while everyone looked at it through their fingers, blinking at the blinding light it emitted under the polar sun. But then, somebody shouted in shock. Everybody turned towards Mary, the village florist. She was an avid birdwatcher in her free time, and she never left the house without her binoculars. Which is why she was able to spot the strange shapes on the iceberg before anyone else. "There's something on top of it," she yelled. The residents couldn't understand why she was so agitated. It wasn't uncommon for seagulls or puffins to hitch a ride on the ice blocks, nor from small objects like fishing gear to get stuck on the top. But when Mary urged other people to look through her binoculars, many more residents gasped in shock, their faces turning pale. Mayor Adrian Kavanagh was a lifelong resident of Fairyland. He was at the forefront of the community's efforts to capitalize on iceberg tourism. A tall, affable man in his early 50s, Adrian was known for his dedication to the village and his ability to rally the community in times of need. When he noticed that his fellow residents were getting upset, he immediately raced to the shore to find out what was happening. When his turn came to use the binoculars, he too couldn't help but let out a strangled scream. The thing on top of the iceberg was not a bird nor a forgotten fishing rod. It was actually a family of polar bears. As word spread about the iceberg with the polar bears, Adrian quickly took charge. He immediately understood the underlying urgency. He stood at the edge of the crowd and assessed the situation with a keen eye. The villagers looked to him for guidance. They trusted his leadership. Under Adrian's direction, they began to discuss possible ways to help. As plans began to form, the residents of Fairyland demonstrated the solidarity that had always defined their village. Major Adrian Kavanagh, with his natural leadership skills, quickly organized a closer inspection of the iceberg. The villagers gathered binoculars. A few of the more daring fishermen prepared their small boats for the cautious journey. A fisherman named Tom was the first to volunteer. His boat, a sturdy vessel named Seafarer, was well equipped for navigating the icy waters. Alongside him were a young wildlife biologist called Storm and a couple of younger fishermen eager to help. The group set off slowly. The vessel cut through the frigid water towards the towering iceberg. As they neared the iceberg, they raised their binoculars to get a better look. The iceberg loomed over them. Its jagged peaks glistened in the early morning sun. The water around it was eerily calm. The only sounds were the lapping of waves against the hull and the distant call of seabirds. Storm was the first to spot the polar bears clearly. "There they are," she whispered, pointing towards a ledge halfway up the iceberg. The female polar bear was unmistakable. Her massive form stood protectively over two small cubs. They huddled close to their mother and looked around with wide, curious eyes. It was clear that they instinctively understood their predicament. If the mother bear was on her own, she might well have been able to swim to safety, but with the cubs, that avenue of escape was not available to her. Tom steadied the boat and everyone took turns observing the bears through their binoculars. The sight was heart-wrenching. The polar bears appeared stranded. The villagers knew the bears were in grave danger if the iceberg continued to drift and melt. Back on shore, the crowd anxiously awaited news. When the boat returned, Tom and Storm quickly shared their observations. It's definitely a female polar bear with 2 cubs, Storm confirmed. They seem stranded on the iceberg. We need to find a way to help them, the villagers were deeply concerned. Polar bears were a rare sight in their waters, and the presence of the cubs made the situation even more urgent. Leaving the bears to their fate was not an option. They needed to act, and fast. Mayor Kavanaugh convened a meeting to discuss the next steps. Boats were prepared. Essential supplies were gathered. The goal was clear. Rescue the polar bears before the iceberg melted further. The community's resolve was strong and their collective spirit shone brightly. As the villagers prepared for the rescue operation, it became increasingly clear that the situation was dire. Storm's initial assessment was correct. The iceberg was melting rapidly. With each passing hour, chunks of ice broke away and drifted into the sea. The polar bear's perch was becoming smaller and more unstable by the minute. Storm stepped forward again. Polar bears are powerful and can be unpredictable, especially when they feel threatened. She explained that we need a plan that keeps us at a safe distance while guiding them to safety. Tom proposed an idea. We could use our boats to create a barrier and guide the iceberg closer to shore. Once it's in shallower waters, we could find a way to coax the bears onto land. Mayor Kavanaugh nodded thoughtfully. The idea was risky, but it was their best option. The local fishermen, who had spent their lives navigating these waters, were the first to step up. Tom volunteered his boat and expertise. We know these waters better than anyone, he said. We'll make sure the bears get to safety. Storm took charge of coordinating the rescue plan. She outlined the strategy and emphasized the importance of keeping both the bears and the rescuers safe. We need to work together seamlessly, she said. Our goal is to guide the bears to a secure location without causing them any distress. Volunteers from all over the village offered their assistance. Some brought nets and ropes, while others provided food and medical supplies. The local hardware store donated materials to build temporary enclosures for the bears. Everyone came together with a single objective: to save the stranded polar bears. The rescue plan involved using the fishermen's boats to create a floating barrier around the iceberg. This would help guide the bears toward the shore without them feeling trapped or threatened. Storm explained that they would need to be patient and gentle and allow the bears to move at their own pace. Once the bears are close enough, we'll use the nets and ropes to create a path to the temporary enclosure. She said that we have tranquilizers ready in case the mother bear becomes agitated, but we'll use them only as a last resort. The fishermen set off to position their boats. Others prepared the nets and ropes on shore. It was a meticulously coordinated effort. Each person played a vital role in the operation. The other boats maneuvered into place and created a semicircle around the iceberg. The other boats followed suit. Slowly, gently, they started nudging the iceberg toward the shore. The polar bears sensed the movement and grew restless, but the villagers maintained a calm and steady approach. On shore, Storm and the volunteers prepared the enclosure in the path. They laid out nets and ropes and ensured that there was a clear and safe route for the bears. As the iceberg drifted closer, the polar bears became more anxious. The mother bear paced back and forth. Her eyes were fixed on the approaching land. The cubs clung to her side. The villagers watched with bated breath, ready to act at a moment's notice. When the iceberg was within reach, the fishermen signaled to the shore team. Storm and the volunteers moved into position. The mother bear hesitated. She sensed the humans nearby. Then, slowly, the mother bear stepped onto the makeshift bridge of ropes and nets. Her cubs followed closely. Step by step, the bears made their way across. Finally, the mother bear and her cubs reached the enclosure. A collective sigh of relief swept through the crowd. The bears were safe. The villagers had successfully completed the first phase of the rescue. The villagers' collaborative efforts had paid off. They had come together and used their skills, resources, and unwavering determination to save the polar bears. Now, with the polar bears safely in the temporary enclosure, the next step was to transport them to a suitable habitat. The villagers had arranged for a larger boat from a nearby town to assist in the journey. The plan was to navigate the polar bears to a wildlife reserve where they would be safe and cared for. However, as they began preparations, unforeseen challenges quickly arose. The weather had played along up to now, but it took a sudden turn. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon and the sea became increasingly rough. The villagers were accustomed to the capricious nature of the ocean. They knew that they had to act quickly before the conditions worsened. Tom and the other fishermen led the effort on the water and coordinated with the larger boat's crew. The choppy seas made it difficult to maneuver, and communication between the boats became challenging. Waves crashed against the hulls and caused the smaller boats to rock precariously. Just as they began to secure the enclosure to the larger boat, one of the nets gave way. The mother bear sensed the instability. She grew agitated and started to pace within the enclosure. Storm quickly signaled to the crew, "We need to calm her down before she tries to escape." Storm grabbed a tranquilizer gun. She was prepared to use it if necessary, but she knew it was crucial to remain calm to prevent further distress to the bears. To complicate matters, one of the engines on the larger boat began to sputter. The crew worked frantically to diagnose and fix the problem. Without full power, navigating the turbulent waters would be nearly impossible. The clock was ticking, and the storm was drawing closer. Tom and the other fishermen used their smaller boats to steady the enclosure and prevent it from drifting away while the larger boat's crew dealt with the engine issue. The villagers onshore watched anxiously. The sense of unity and teamwork was stronger than ever. After what felt like an eternity, the engine roared back to life and the net was secured. The villagers knew they couldn't afford to lose focus. The seas were still rough and the storm was imminent. They had to move quickly and carefully to ensure the bears' safety. The larger boat was now fully operational again. It began the delicate task of transporting the enclosure. Tom and the other fishermen flanked the boat. They used their smaller vessels to provide additional stability. Storm kept a close eye on the bears, ready to administer a tranquilizer if needed. As the convoy made its way through the rough waters, they communicated constantly. The boats adjusted their positions and speeds to navigate the challenging conditions. The teamwork was nothing short of remarkable. By the time they reached the reserve, the storm had begun to abate. The bears were carefully transferred to their new habitat where they would receive the care and protection they needed. The rescue operation had faced significant challenges, but the community's spirit and determination had prevailed. They had overcome the obstacles together and knew that they had achieved something extraordinary. News of the extraordinary rescue operation quickly spread. It captured the attention of media outlets both locally and internationally. Journalists and camera crews descended upon the small village. All were eager to document the heroic efforts of the community. The story of how a tight-knit group of villagers had come together to save the stranded polar bears was both heartwarming and inspiring. Mayor Adrian Kavanaugh, Tom, Storm, and other key figures were interviewed. Their stories highlighted the teamwork and determination that had made the rescue possible. The villagers shared their experiences, emphasizing the collective effort and the deep sense of responsibility they felt towards the stranded animals. Storm spoke passionately about the importance of conservation in the role that communities play in protecting wildlife. "This rescue showed what we can achieve when we come together with a common purpose," she said. "It's a reminder that every action, no matter how small, can make a significant difference." The media coverage brought a wave of positive attention to Fairyland. The village used to be known primarily for its fishing and iceberg tourism. Now, it is celebrated for its compassion and resilience. Donations and support poured in from around the world to help fund the wildlife reserve and other local conservation efforts. As the excitement of the successful rescue began to settle, an unexpected revelation came to light, one that added a deeply personal layer to the story. An elderly fisherman named Samuel had lived in Fairyland his entire life. He quietly approached Storm and Mayor Kavanaugh one evening after the media frenzy had died down. Samuel's weathered face held a look of recognition and nostalgia. He recounted a fishing trip from years ago. During the trip, he had encountered a lone polar bear while navigating the icy waters far from the village. The bear, which he now believed to be the same one they had just rescued, had been stranded on a small ice floe. Samuel had shared a brief, poignant moment with the animal, offering it some of his catch before it drifted away. Tears filled Samuel's eyes as he spoke. "I never forgot her," he said. His voice trembled with emotion. "Seeing her again, with her cubs and being able to help this time, it means more than I can say." The villagers were moved by Samuel's story. They realized the full circle of his connection with the polar bear. This emotional bond underscored the significance of their rescue mission and highlighted the deep, often unseen connections between humans and wildlife. The successful rescue was not just a triumph for the village, it was a profoundly meaningful closure for Samuel and evidence of the enduring spirit of compassion and care that defined Fairyland. The polar bears, now safely relocated to a wildlife reserve, adapted well to their new environment. Storm kept the villagers updated on their progress. She shared pictures and reports that showed the mother bear and her cubs thriving. This ongoing connection with the bears further cemented the bond between the village and the animals they had saved. The media attention brought by the rescue continued to shine a positive light on Fairyland. The village's story of bravery and compassion was featured in numerous news articles, documentaries, and even a short segment on a popular nature program. Tourists flocked to the village not just for the icebergs, but to learn about the community's inspiring story. The influx of visitors boosted the local economy and provided new opportunities for businesses and residents alike. Donations poured in, allowing the community to fund various environmental initiatives. They created better facilities for wildlife observation and rescue. Storm spearheaded these efforts. She worked hand in hand with the villagers to ensure that Fairyland remained a sanctuary for both humans and animals. In the evenings, as the sun set over the tranquil waters, the villagers often gathered at the shore. The iceberg that had once brought a sense of foreboding had ultimately led to a heartwarming tale of unity and resilience. Do you have a story about a wildlife rescue that changed the fortunes of everyone involved? Tell us about it in the comments, we'd love to hear. For now though, we're out of here. We'll catch you in the next video.